Over the next 30 minutes, I will take you into my journey of over 30 years facing the adversity by using three simple choices. My name is Raman. I am a global authority in learning and performance. I teach, coach, and speak on how to speed up your time to mastery. I am a lifelong disabled guy. I walk with crutches. So you can say that it's ironic that I can hardly walk, but I teach organizations and professionals how to walk faster in what they do. When I was 6 months old, I contracted the polio virus. I was born in poor remote area in India. If you don't know what polio is, perhaps it's sufficient to say that it's this planet's deadliest disease. Most people infected with it died instantly. Others would have paralyzed lungs, and they will have to depend upon a iron lung all their life to breathe. Even today, there is no cure for it. I survived somehow, but I got one leg paralyzed. I lost the ability to walk well before reaching that age where I could walk. So I was left to carry this permanent disability throughout my life. I think I have to paint this picture. The first 20 years of my life have not been any less than a Homo sapien evolution. Remember that evolution path we used to, how early humans evolved into a modern species? I also evolved through somewhat similar stages. When I was a toddler, I could barely crawl on the floor. As I grew up, I began to stand on one leg while lifting up other leg with hands to put ahead of me to take a limping kind of steps. So eventually I learned to use the prosthetics, then walking with canes. Then finally I learned to walk painfully with crutches. So I've gone through some really painful stages of coming in terms with my challenges. I believe every one of us has faced some adversity in our life, isn't it? It could be medical, financial, personal, professional, or anything else. Those adversities might bring some failures, misfortunes, losses, or limitations. We have to admit that some losses can't be filled in ever. My losses was something which were there to stay forever, but I was not prepared. 45 years ago in India, a remote, uneducated region, there was no educational or medical facilities. There was no future for a kid like me who could merely crawl on the floor. There was no concept of a special education either. In fact, there was hardly any education avenues. The nearest school was several kilometers away. Under that condition, I was almost ruled out to go to any school. I'm not sure how much you know about situation 45 years ago back in India, but imagine this, that my fate was no better than begging on the streets, because that was the norm around me for disabled, crippled kids like me, especially if they came from a very poor background. But then my parents wanted to do whatever they could to send me to school. So when I reached the age to go to school, I think it was 6 or 7 years of age back then, someone suggested I wear prosthetics on my leg. It's called calipers. It had many straps, steel rods, and heavy bolts to keep my leg in place. Its weight was some 20 kg, more than my own weight at that age. So I could barely take one baby step at a time with those iron casts around my leg. Though I looked like a one-legged Autobot transformer, but I was more often teased as one-legged boy. It is such a unique, rare piece of prosthetic that Kansas State Museum even had such a piece displayed in their collections. So imagine that is such an ancient thing which I'm talking about. So I used to go to school wearing those prosthetics or walking with my classmates. I had no way to match pace with my classmates. So I was mocked at, made fun of, bullied, or more often left behind. So imagine how bad a 7-year-old kid would feel when left alone on the road. There were moments when I had to drag my iron cast leg back home with all the strength of my stomach muscles. I used to cry. Those tears in my eye, I think it wasn't because of physical pain, but it was more because of emotional pain. So that 2 kilometers of distance from school to home, I used to cover in 2 hours. It felt like a lifetime back then. I lived that cycle for years and years. Many of you must have experienced something like this in your life when you felt helpless victim. The moment you faced adversity, you felt as if you were dragging a heavy weight with you. That's when you probably felt being left behind. You probably felt unwelcoming in the world around you. You felt helpless. You feel constrained. You feel prisoned. I call them as walls of limitations because those walls stop us from doing what we really want to do. And within those walls, many of us feel like victim. And we victim typically respond to such kind of situation in three ways. Some of us tend to accept it too soon without even putting up any fight. We say it is part of us. We gotta need to accept it. This is the reality. And then some of us make compromises. We say nothing can be done about it. But we keep sulking over it despite making a compromise. And then some of us complain about our misfortunes. Why me? It shouldn't happen to me. I don't deserve it. Back then, I could hardly go to school with kids. I couldn't go to playground. I couldn't play regular sports. Even if I went sometime, I wouldn't be taken in any game. So I had no social circle back then. So my response to adversity was that I could not accept it. And I could not compromise with it either. I could only complain. I also asked the same question, why me? But more I asked, the more unpleasant answers I got from within myself. Someone inside kept on telling me that I was not good enough as others. So I felt even worse. So those are the moments when you feel stuck in an infinite, never-ending, depressing loop, isn't it? Stuck inside those walls of limitations. Have you ever felt being stuck inside those walls in your life? But you might have noticed that there comes a point when we say, enough of it. I'm going to do something about it. We shed away our victim mode and then we become like a fighter. You know, Darwin, he was a human evolution scientist. He says one thing, that we are one of those species who fought for survival for millions of years. That fight is in our blood. Human beings have undergone centuries of wars. That has also made us warriors who are ready to fight the moment we see a daunting wall ahead of us. Back then, I had read many motivational books. How often have those motivational gurus told you, break the boundaries, break the walls, nothing can stop you. And then you get yourself in that very highly motivational, charged mode to attack those walls, don't you? Back then, I thought my disability was the wall that was preventing me from being socially accepted and feeling belonged. So the fighter inside me came out in the limelight and it started fighting against that wall. Somehow I got this willpower, grit, determination to do something about that wall. How many of you can relate to it? I subjected myself secretly to the harshest physical exercises. I used to forcefully bend my leg in the hope of making them stronger. I applied some self-invented physiotherapy exercises, all of that without telling anyone. Secretly, I hoped someday I would get better at my disability to some extent. But guess what? More I tried, more my emotional and physical problem escalated to the point of breakdown. I couldn't change anything as far as my ability to walk was concerned. I wonder, why did my human survival spirit, great willpower, all those things fail in my case? Was I not a good enough fighter? I found the answer later in my life. Many psychologists tell us that when we are in fight mode, we don't evaluate all factors. We sort of go blind because we get into this charged willpower mode where our pride kicks in. We tell ourselves, I must win this war. I must keep trying. I can't fail. I can't quit. When we are in that state, we we don't even bother to see if we are indeed breaking the correct wall. We just want to break it. In that mode, we all forget an important lesson from centuries of history and civilization. How could we win a war without knowing the opponent well enough? I was trying to fight with and trying to break the wrong wall. I did not understand who I was up against really. My inability to walk was not the real walls that were restricting me. My real walls were actually very unreal. Those were made up of self-beliefs in my mind. Those were the victim stories of helplessness I told myself over and over again. I told myself that only way for me to be welcomed in any social circle was to look and walk like them. Otherwise, I would not be good enough for the world. I would be a social reject. If you look at that one, those were unreal walls that were dragging me back. Those did not exist, but I made up those in my mind. Those were perceived walls. So I was doubly disabled, externally and internally. I realized that it was me who was creating unreal walls to prison myself. One day, one kind soul came to become my friend in my high school. He took pain to take me out to school every day on his bicycle, and then he will drop me back every day. He was with me for several years until he had to drop out of school due to his conditions. But by then, he had helped me to see that I was desirable. He helped me to see what walls were real and what walls were unreal. When I was able to break the perceived walls of feeling like a victim, it changed the way I approached the world. Imagine what? I became someone with the largest friendship circle, so much so that I was often called a party maker. Isn't it such a big change? So we all have those unreal perceived walls that hold us back, that don't let us walk forward. So I concluded that day that not all walls that constrain us are indeed real. Many are just made up inside our minds. We need to be able to understand our walls and should not take every adversity that comes our way as a daunting wall. Our war with any of those walls admits when we face a hardship, failure, adversity, or misfortune, it wouldn't end unless we reflect on first choice. Do we take time to understand our walls? Do we identify if our walls are real or just made up in our minds? Are we really breaking the correct walls? We need to focus on breaking the right wall that makes the difference in our life. But then, I cannot deny one thing, the reality that my real walls were still real. The fact remained that I could not walk like normal kids. So I found that before we set out changing the world, we need to be clear about what things can be changed and what must be accepted as it is. And then when we accept it, then we will understand the true nature of our walls. More often, those unreal walls will keep holding us back, keep coming back to us if we don't accept the reality. But my acceptance did not come that easy. I never could accept what I was into. For 15 years, can you imagine that I shied away from the camera to avoid getting pictured with my leg? So those perceived walls keep haunting back for years and years because I was far from true acceptance. Many times we trick ourselves saying that we have accepted what we are into, but if we keep sucking over it, it's not true acceptance because true acceptance gives strength, not misery. So I had to experience something beyond making compromises or complaints. It was that true acceptance. I think the world around us makes it difficult to attain that true acceptance of our incompetence or our losses or our lacks. When we face adversity, we are likely to feel some losses, isn't it? Those losses may make us feel less than others. Those are likely to make us feel, I'm not enough. But then we have been taught wrongly to keep chanting a motivational slogan, I'm enough, I'm enough. We feel good momentarily while giving those positive affirmations to ourselves. But that feeling of, that willpower or motivation is very short lived because it forces us to skip the stage of true acceptance. Deep down, we keep feeling the truth of not being enough, though we show to the world some sort of made up confidence and false positivity. It does not become genuine confidence or genuine acceptance because we keep saying, I am enough. We are then telling our minds that our glasses are full, and our minds stop looking for possibilities. If we don't truly feel I am not enough, how we are going to generate that hunger to fill that up? Why not admit the truth that I am not enough? This crutch I walk with symbolically reminds me every moment of my life that I'm not enough. But that's okay because my loss, my disability defines me, who I am. It defines me. My disability defines me, who I was yesterday, who I am today, and who I'm going to be tomorrow. I had to accept it as part of my personality. But it does the wonder. When we make that choice, when we really accept that our glasses are half empty, genuine things to fill it up. And that's how we create new possibilities and new definitions of ourselves, despite our losses, misfortunes, adversities, or limitations. I know I'm not enough. That acceptance makes me hungry to fill it up somehow. That hunger took me places. It put me on the path that brought me a beautiful partner in my life. It made me adopt an outstanding career. It made me a world traveler where I traveled solo, unassisted. So much so that my disability became my identity, my X factor, my differentiator. To sum up so far, the first choice I made was to identify the perceived walls that indeed were actually stopping me. And then the second choice I made was to accept the real walls that I had to accept that couldn't be changed. But then there was third choice left to learn, and that was how to be a true fighter for something that must be changed. So let me talk about that aspect for a while. Back then, whenever my classmates left me behind, I of course felt bad. But then every time I made a pact with myself, if I can't walk faster, I would walk faster with something else. But the big question was how? Back there in my room, there was a window. I used to watch kids playing all day long in the playground. And that was my routine for years and years. At the end of the day, I would hear their mothers yelling at them to return back home. And here I was. Nobody ever came to my room and yelled at me to stand up from a chair and stop daydreaming. That was a realization moment. I realized that my disability gave me some gifts I did not recognize earlier. I had no social interruptions, no spoiler friends, and because of that, I had plenty of distraction-free time at my disposal. And that was an uncommon gift for a kid in that age, isn't it? What could I do with that unique leverage? I was glued to a chair, isolated in a room with very little mobility. Reading books and learning from them became my top bet. So then I immersed myself in the world of learning. I started reading any book I could find near me. I remember that first book I read was Dale Carnegie. While kids could hardly read comics, so soon I mastered poetry, chemistry, astronomy, physics, science, and any other book I could afford to buy or borrow. So many of those books, as you see, were ahead of my age. I was hungry for speed because that was the thing I missed the most. So I found speed in something else. So I was hungry to learn faster. So guess what? That's how I ended up with 2 doctorates and over 100 international credentials, some of world's highest certifications. So I found a way to walk faster than others. So several decades later, today I stand as a performance scientist guiding people to speed up their performance in professional settings. It's ironic, isn't it? So as I realized now that had I continued with that mindset to break the walls, I probably could have been still struggling with my walls even today. Perhaps I could have ended somewhere else. But I chose not to struggle with the walls, but instead see the windows among those walls. When I saw my crisis, my disability, my setbacks, my limitations, I did not see walls. I began to spot windows. The windows of opportunities, windows of leverages, and windows of advantages. So once I spotted them, I leveraged everything my limitations offered to me. I leveraged my ability to read science and engineering books ahead of my age. Though people ruled out the possibility, but I became an engineer at the age of 21. And a year later, I became a technology scientist. I had an unmatchable leverage, I would say. I had the luxury to get engaged in daydreaming uh, without anyone scolding me. So that's where, the creative writer inside me woke up. I wrote dramas, stories, poetries, and many things while other kids were perhaps still struggling to write an essay. So while I could not afford to buy one book in my childhood, today I am the author of 20 books. So quite a kind of a transformation from that angle, if you see. I had another leverage, just like other kids. That was my healthy hands. While sitting in chair, what else I could do? I tried arts, painting, and other creative things while other kids were probably playing cricket. So because of that, I recently also received an International Artist Award for things I created back then. You see, in all this, my real wall, which is not being able to walk, that wall did not come my way. Perhaps in more ways, it helped me to go there faster. And that's how I learned this third choice, that we don't even have to break every single wall when we truly start looking at the leverages our adversity offers. There could be windows right through them. Those windows will let you see the world beyond those walls. You will find new business opportunities by betting on your losses. You will find tons of leverages even in your failed projects. And you will begin to spot new opportunities even in your lacks. In the end, I would like all of you to recall all your losses which are caused by your adversities, disabilities, failures, setbacks, limitations, or hardships. And think about three questions, or rather three choices. Are you breaking the correct wall that's limiting you? Are you genuinely accepting the walls that can't be broken? Are you locating windows among the walls that can't be broken? When you make these three choices, your losses will not let you feel less than others. Your losses will become your leverages that can become lessons for others. And that's how I learned that these three choices can transform our life. It can give us the strength to face the adversity, and not only face the adversity and find the strength, rather to leverage our limitations and our weaknesses, turn those around miraculously.